today's class we are going to discuss ecological succession. Okay. Now see, a biotic community is never going to be static. It always will keep changing. As in, sometimes a few species will colonize an area, but eventually, when they are not fit, or rather, there are more stronger or fit species, they would be further colonizing the area and replacing the older ones. So this will constantly keep happening, due to which the community structure of an ecosystem will constantly undergo a change. So this series of or sequence, orderly sequence of species that colonizes our area or a particular environment would be referred as ecological succession. Okay, so let's see this. See, gradual and fairly predictable changes in the species composition of a given area are collectively called ecological succession. Okay, now during succession, some species will colonize an area and their population will increase, whereas population of other species will decline and sometimes even disappear. So this will constantly keep happening in any area or at any given time. Okay, so this is known as ecological succession. One species after another, this orderly sequence that keeps on happening is called ecological succession. Okay, now types of successional communities. Now see, in any kind of ecological succession, there are mainly three types of communities that can be seen. Suppose there is a bare area, where no organisms have ever colonized. It is a newly developed area. Okay, suppose an area which was under the sea but now has been newly formed. Okay, so in that case, no organism have ever lived there. Okay, in such a bare area, the first organism or the first species that starts to colonize or starts to inhabit an area, that is going to be the first organism to begin the succession, isn't it? So this organism or this species would be referred as the pioneer community. The first community that would ever colonize a bare area where no other organisms have ever existed, that is going to be the pioneer community. And eventually, when like in the ecological succession process, the species which is in near equilibrium with nature, so that it will not further change, that is the last one. Okay, suppose what I'm trying to tell here is that ecological succession is a series of species that keeps on colonizing an area in a particular given period of time. So the first species that colonizes will be known as the pioneer community, and the last one, which is in near equilibrium with nature, the last one in the series will be known as the climax community. First one to begin the succession is pioneer. The last one to end the succession is known as the climax community. And in between, whatever species had colonized the area, they would be known as serial or transitional communities. Okay, so there are three types of ecological or rather successional communities. First, pioneer community. The first biotic community that develops in a bare area would be referred as pioneer community. For example, lichens on the rock and phytoplanktons in pond, they are always going to be the pioneer community. Okay, next, climax community. The last community in biotic succession, which is relatively stable and is in near equilibrium with the environment. It is so much in balance that further change in it will not occur. So that is the climax community. For example, forest. After forest or beyond forest, there is no further succession that is going to occur. Okay, because forest is in the near equilibrium with nature. Alright. Now, in between pioneer and climax remains the transitional or sealer communities. Okay, see this? The pioneer community is followed by specific orderly sequence of plant communities known as the serial communities. For example, bryophyte herbs, shrubs in case of xerosear, that means in case of the terrestrial habitat, and submerged floating plants in case of aquatic habitat or in ponds. Alright, so This is very clear. Ecological succession means a series of communities that ever start appearing in a particular area in an orderly sequence. All right, so the first community to start the succession is going to be called as pioneer community. The last one to end the succession is called the climax community, and in between comes the serial or transitional communities. All right, now next, types of succession. Now, depending upon the nature of the habitat, what kind of habitat we are talking about, the succession can be of two types. Xerosear, that is in case of dry habitat. Likewise, in case of terrestrial habitat. See, takes place in dry area like in rock, sand and saline conditions. Whereas hydrosear, hydro means water. So in that case, this would be occurring in aquatic habitat. Takes place in aquatic habitat. Alright. Likewise, if we try to categorize the type of succession on the basis of or depending upon the nudity of the area, that means from where exactly the succession is beginning. Accordingly, we have again two types of succession. First is primary succession and then secondary succession. Primary succession means it starts in barren area, okay, where never ever any vegetations or never having any vegetations of any type, or where no organisms ever existed. So suppose what I was telling you about, suppose a new area has been formed. Part of the land which was under the sea has suddenly appeared. So in that case, that is a completely barren area. No organisms have ever lived there, right? So in such an area, when succession begins from zero, there was nothing at all there, and from the very zero it starts, then we will call it primary succession. Alright, but in case suppose area which was well colonized before, suppose a forest, an area was covered under a forest, but due to some reason the forest was burned, or the forest was cut down. So now, because of this natural calamities, or because of some kind of man-made activities, that area which was actually a forest has been completely cleared off. Now no species are present there. So in such an area also ecological succession will begin. But is it starting from zero? No. There are some kind of organisms still existing in that area, right? So when it starts in an area which was actually previously colonized, then we will call it secondary succession. Is that clear? If succession begins completely afresh, we will call it primary. If it begins from not from zero but from somewhere in between, we will call it secondary succession. As simple as that. So see this? It starts in barren area, never having vegetation of any type, or where no organisms ever existed. That is primary succession. Example will be sand dunes, cooled lava, and it is very difficult as slow process. Primary succession is of course going to be very difficult, because pioneer community to grow in such an area will take a very long time. It will not be happening all of a sudden or rapidly. So it's a very difficult process, and also very slow process. Thousands of years will be required for that area to be colonized by organisms. Alright. Secondary succession, on the other hand, it starts in area that somehow lost all organisms, like burn or cut down forest, flooded lands, etc. So because it is not going to be an area completely, completely in lack of organisms, that's why it is going to be a fast process. Secondary succession is going to be much more rapid in comparison to the primary succession. Alright. So this is all about ecological succession, which was discussed by Hult, and this is all about the type of successional communities and the type of succession. I hope it is clear. Now next, let us discuss further regarding the process. Now let us discuss in details regarding the process of succession. Okay, mainly we are going to talk here with respect to plants. How in a bare area the plant communities will gradually start colonizing, giving rise to the entire forest, okay, or the climax community. Okay, so let's see this. First, the first step to any succession would be exposure of a new area. At first, a new area has to expose itself. Only then the succession process can begin, right? So first is nudation. Second is migration. Migration means the process of dispersal of seeds or spores, etc. in that area. From somewhere else, the seeds or spores or various other types of propagules must reach out to the new area that has been exposed. This is called migration. Next, germination. The germination, you know that the seeds or the other propagules that have now migrated to the bare area, they must germinate successfully. And this would of course be occurring only under favorable conditions. Okay. Now, in cases. This means the successful germination and establishment of those seeds. Whatever seeds or propagules have been brought, they should be able to germinate and also successfully establish themselves in the new area. Next, colonization and aggregation. Colonization and aggregation means after they have successfully established themselves in the new area, they would now under favorable conditions start to reproduce so that their number will keep on increasing over the time. So, increase in number due to reproduction. Next, competition and coaction. Now that the population of the species would increase, okay, there will be number of species that have aggregated in the area. At that time, the inter and intra-specific competition would start or begin, right? Inter means in between two different species, and intra means within the same species. Competition for the resources would start. And at that time, what would happen is a very, very important step. That is, the weaker plants will subside or they would be eliminated from the area. Alright. Now, invasion. Next step being invasion. See, when the weaker plants will be eliminated, some space will be left by them. Those empty spaces would be now colonized by some new plants, and that is called invasion. Alright, see this? Many other plants try to colonize in the space left by the previous eliminated plants. Alright? Now, reaction. See, the newly arrived plants, whoever have invaded the area, these newly arrived plants would interrupt with the existing ones. Due to this interruption, there will be certain reactions happening, due to which as well, the communities will try to stabilize themselves. They will now try to gain more and more of stability within this, strong species. There will be a kind of stability that will start arising. And finally, stabilization. Final step is, of course, after a lot of reactions going on in between the species, the stronger ones who are not getting eliminated, they will now finally get stabilized. And that would lead to the formation of a climax community that, of course, with respect to plant would be forest, right? So see this, the process when final climax community becomes stabilized for a long time. Now this will not further change, and the ecological succession would be remaining in this equilibrium for a longer time, for a much longer time. Okay, and because with respect to plants we have talked about in these steps, so in that case the climax community of course will be forest. Alright, so these are the 9 steps how the process of succession would begin and finally come to an end. Alright, very easy, right? But just you need to remember the sequence, right? So this being regarding the process of succession, next let us discuss that how the ecosystem characteristics will change during succession. What are the changes that would be occurring in the ecosystem while the succession would keep on proceeding? Okay, see, first, changing diversity of the species. The species diversity will keep changing. First, a pioneer community will start. It will colonize an area. Then eventually another species which will be much more stronger or much more fit will accumulate in that area. Eventually, the weaker ones will be eliminated and new species will invade the area. Likewise, continuously the species diversity will change, right? Next, little diversity to high degree of diversity. In the very beginning, there may be a very, very less amount of diversity that can be seen in the ecosystem, but as the succession will keep proceeding, the high degree of diversity would begin. Okay, the diversity will now keep increasing over time. Total biomass would increase as the number of species will keep increasing. Of course, the organic matter content or the biomass will also increase. Increasing humus content of the soil. Again, with respect to the organic matter increased in the ecosystem, the amount of fertile or amount of nutrient enriched humus will also increase in the soil. Next, aquatic to dry conditions will be converted to mesic conditions. Now this one is very important to point. See, succession, as you know very well, can begin in the terrestrial habitat also, and it can begin in the aquatic habitat also. But for both the type of succession, be it xeric or be it in case of terrestrial or be it in case of aquatic, both the successions will finally have a same destination. They will finally be falling under the same condition. That means whether the succession starts from dry, eventually as the succession proceeds and it reaches the climax community, it will be moving towards mesic condition. Mesic means neither too dry nor too wet. Likewise, even if a succession begins in the aquatic habitat, that also will finally proceed and reach out at last to a mesic condition. Again, not too dry, not too wet. Understood? So both the type of succession, be it in land or be it in aquatic medium, when finally they reach the climax community, the condition that will persist will be a mesic condition, neither too dry nor too wet. So both the like hydrarch, that is called aquatic succession, or xerarch, that is called the terrestrial succession, both will lead to the same condition, that is mesic condition. This is very important for you to remember. All right. Next, change in number and types of animals and decomposers. Of course, if the plants are continuously changing, in that case, eventually the type of animals or the decomposers will also change in their diversity as the in the ecosystem, as the succession would keep changing or it will keep occurring. All right. So this being the entire discussion regarding succession, I hope ecological succession is clear to you. In the next class, we'll start with types of succession.